Once again, welcome to the WhistleShields Podcast. I am your host, Claudia Aldrich. Hello, Mr. Keith Duda, retired El Paso County Sheriff's Office Sergeant. We have the pleasure to have him with us in our first actual video interview, which we're planning to put on YouTube. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it more than I can tell you. You are the top interview that I wanted to do, and I'm really, really happy to have you here. So let's start by asking you about your background. Who are you and how did you get into law enforcement?
Well, I grew up in Virginia and then moved to Colorado in 1994. Studied at Old Dominion University for criminal justice, minor in sociology. So always wanted to be a police officer, but I kind of waited till later in my life, one, to have more maturity. Second, I kind of had my own business and was making money and that kind of took a priority because once you start a family, you have to be able to support that family. But the market kind of took a turn in 2005 and 6 in Colorado. The housing market wasn't that great. And so I saw an ad for the sheriff's office and I'm like, oh, I've always wanted to be a police officer. So I signed up and I actually thought I was signing up for the posse, which is a volunteer type one. And then as they're doing the background, I get through the background check and they offer me a full-time position. So I was like, ooh, well, that's different. So, but I, was appreciative and took the position.
Okay. How was the training? How, when you first start, how does it go in the academy? And how do you get to be a sergeant? I mean, how long did it take you?
I started in the academy May of 2006. It's a 6-month academy. It's a paid academy. So the office pays you to be going through their academy. And then after I completed that, in the sheriff's office, you always go into the jail first. I was lucky that the last group that got hired on, we could use, we're on probation for 1 year, but they allowed our probation to be during our academy as well. The next academy, they made it a year after you graduated. But so when I was in the jail for about 6 months, I mean, a total of 8. And I remember in the academy, they would say, it'll be 5, 6 years before you get out to patrol or move to something else because there's just so many veterans and they're not moving. And so the positions don't open up. And within 8 months, I was moved out to patrol. While on patrol, I did that for 4 years, then went to a specialized unit called the Crime Reduction Unit, spent almost 5 years or 6 years on that. And from moving out of the Crime Reduction Unit, I was promoted to a sergeant and then went back to patrol.
And any mentors or special people that helped you along the way?
Yes. When you go to the academy, they assign a mentor to you. And of course, once you are in the academy, you meet a lot of great officers and deputies and people. So you bond relationships with them and they're always there to help you, study for tests or get you ready for the post exam, give you insight on how things work. Officer safety. I mean, there's a lot of aspects because when you're in the academy, it's like drinking from a fire hose. There's so much information coming at you and you got to try to retain it and use it, but you also got to keep it in there. So it can be difficult, but if you stay dedicated to it, it's not that bad. And then of course, all the physical stuff, you have to do arrest control, firearms, driving training. So, and building searches. I mean, there's always something. You feel like you're in the movie Forrest Gump, when he was in Vietnam. We're always looking for Charlie. I mean, there's always something to do when you're going to the academy.
And then you're now in this specialized unit. What does it take to get into, a specialized unit? I want people that have never learned about what it takes, because you're right, it's a massive amount of information you guys have to know.
Yes.
What does it take to get into these? I mean, it's testing, it's
It
hours
is.
of
It's interviews, testing, understanding, making sure you know the Colorado law, constitutional law. You're doing high-end type work. It's just not a normal call for service. You're hunting fugitives. You're doing huge crime statistics for if a neighborhood starts getting broken into a lot or a lot of cars being broken into. We took those cases from the deputy to relieve them of that. And then we start trying to find out who and why is it occurring, and then dedicate our time directly on those problem areas. But yeah, she would go through an oral board. You have to test for it, and then if you're chosen, you get moved in. I mean, it's hard. I mean, because there's a lot of deputies that try for it, so it takes a lot of dedication and who you are to get on those specialized teams.
All right. And so finally, or how many of these specialized units do you do before you decide to become a sergeant?
Well, I did the crime reduction unit. That was a fugitive recovery one. I also joined the crisis negotiations unit, so I could go through the negotiation courses of the FBI. So that way you can communicate with people a little better, especially people in crisis or mental health issues. So I went to those courses and went on to that team as well. And let's see what else. I kind of worked with the cadet program too, because I like mentoring younger people to try to get them into the law enforcement realm and let them know what we do, how things work. And the kids, it's like an explorer post. They enjoy it, and they're able to wear a uniform, come out, ride along with us, go to parades or fairs, and kind of work with us, and they kind of see all the law enforcement firsthand.
Okay. So there's a lot of pride that you could say is involved into being an officer. There's a lot of camaraderie and family, and I'm sure you had lots of friends, hang out with them.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
So you were in at each other's parties and knew everybody and weddings, and it's a pretty tight-knit community, right?
It is, and you once you get to know, you get to know their families, and then all our families get together. It's like a brotherhood. I mean, everybody protects everybody's back, and when you go out on calls for service, that's what you expect. You're hoping that someone, the person that's standing next to you or going on that call with you has your back 100%. So, you build a bond that's just, I would say, even unbreakable sometimes. I mean, but you do have other people you get in conflict with. I mean, just like any other workplace, some people can get along together. You're going into a house full of alpha dogs. That's, I mean, the easiest way to put it for police officers. We are a personality people. So it's
Yeah.
competitive, very competitive.
Okay. So then you go through all these specialized units. So you did the first one, then did you do, how many others did you do in total?
Just mainly working with the cadets, and then the crisis
Okay.
negotiations and the CNU, and then got promoted to sergeant. And then it's kind of, you step back again and go back to patrol. And then you start working through the ranks again. It's kind of, you're a whole new person. Now you're not an equal. You're their supervisor over them. So you kind of step back a little bit and then start up again and start working your way back up.
Okay. So you lose your seniority in shifts and all of that. So
You
you got to
do, because
start.
yes. Yeah,
Wow.
because when you go from senior deputy and you're living your best life on the weekends off because you've been out there so long, I get promoted to sergeant. I'm right at the bottom of the pile of sergeants. My EID doesn't matter anymore. So it's on the dates of your promotions that you
What's the
start back
ID?
over. Oh,
What is the
your
ID?
number. The EID is your like employee number. That's where it ranks you. It gives you a year. The EID is a year and what number employee you were hired at. So if let's say 2006, my number was 069. So I was the 69th person hired in 2006. So anybody below me is behind me. Anybody above me, Mr. 67 or 66, they have more seniority than me by 2 spots.
Oh,
And 2 spots is a lot. Comes to shift
really?
bids. Yes.
Okay.
It's the
Okay.
difference between day shift to midnights with no weekends off. Yes. So it's very important.
Yeah, that's a lot of sacrifice. See, those little things that we civilians don't know. And of course, one thing I wanted to touch with you is, for the conversations we've had, you are a very, very normal person. I could walk, down the street and you'd be like anyone. I would never even think you're a cop. Okay. Or you
Yes.
were a cop,
And I
nothing
can
like
carry
that.
a conversation with anyone in any situation, and you wouldn't really know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely not. I don't know, but it's very important, I think, for people to understand that police officers are humans too.
They are. It's just a job, and We're doing
That's
our
right.
job, so don't take it personally against us. We have a mission or a job to do, and that's what we have to do.
Yeah, a job to protect the rest of the world, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely. Okay. So you get to be sergeant, and what talk about some of the responsibilities that that entails, including obviously, you're as an officer, and many people who work in government are mandated reporters, right? So
Correct.
if you can talk about that.
Yeah, well, being a sergeant, obviously, I supervise a certain group of people that are put under me, and I have to watch them, mentor them, as well as watch over maybe other sergeants on our shifts, people, and we kind of work together. But yes, one of the big things is if you see something or hear something, I have a duty to report it. During both my wife and my daughter worked inside the jail as civilians. My wife worked in intake and my daughter was a security tech. And at one of her lunches, we was sitting there and I'm sitting, she's turning 21 and all her friends are 21 and some of them just went through the academy and went from security tech to a deputy. And my daughter wasn't interested in doing that, but they're still there. And as I'm sitting there, I'm listening to them talk because I'm like the only male there, it felt like. And then I overhear one of the girls make a comment about being like sexually touched in an inappropriate way, like a pat search of her. And it kind of caught my ear. And I just listened for a little bit longer. And then as she was talking about it, I said, he did what? It was a lieutenant that did it. I go, I've never been pat searched again since the academy. So why are you being pat searched by another officer or a deputy? And I said, is that the only thing they did? And she went into detail of other text messages being sent to her. And, I questioned, how did he get her phone number? Did you give it to him? And she said, no, I didn't give him my cell number. He would pull her into his office and make comments or pull her aside in corridors inside the jail because they both worked inside the jail. And he would make comments to her like, we need to be careful. People are going to talk, if they see them together. And it's like he was trying to see what the boundaries are. And then, I'm trying to think what else. I mean, there was multiple incidences. And she tells me that she's documenting because it's on, she's documenting it. So it tells me it's unwanted. So I knew at that point it was something I needed to report.
Okay. All right. So just for clarification, so people can understand this, when you are in an academy, police or any other, I mean, you get gassed, you get
Yeah.
searched, you
Tasered.
get,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Or you
you,
get handcuffed, you get slammed to the ground,
yeah.
you get bruised, you get beat up, in both male and female search each other. I mean, it's a normal practice because maybe during in the real world, we may not have a female deputy on and, a female can search a male anytime, but it's a little more sensitive for a male searching a female. So, but if we don't have a female deputy available for that, we still have to do that pat search before we put them in our car.
Yeah, so
So
these are
there's
practice
training. Yeah.
scenarios. Okay, yeah,
Yep.
practice scenarios that you have to be able to do because you're gonna have to do them in the field, right?
Correct.
Wasn't that.
No, it
This
was
was
not.
on the job
On duty, and it occurred.
duty. Okay, and this is a lieutenant, I imagine older than her by a
Yes,
lot?
I would say probably
Okay.
about 15, 20 years.
15 or 20 years older than her. Wow, okay. Did she, was she forthcoming with you when she told you? Did she, feel like, wow, finally somebody's, listening to me?
Oh,
And
yes, I think she felt relieved a little to be able to talk about it, and, I mean, I didn't tell her, I have a duty to report it, but I knew, if that was my daughter, I would have hoped someone would report it 'cause it's a hard world out there, and it's a man's world, as they say, and if you report stuff like that, they just beat you down even more as a female to try to silence you, and so they don't feel that they have enough courage to come out and actually report it themselves. So maybe, she did it to let it slip, but, I did report it.
okay. And once you heard it, let's go back a little bit because we've talked
Okay.
about it. Once you heard it, you knew what the repercussions of doing that would be.
Yes, because it was the sheriff's best friend, one of his friends that his wife was his campaign manager. His name was William Huffer or Billy Huffer, and his wife is Janet Huffer. And she was given a position where she used to work at the sheriff's office. And then as soon as the new sheriff came in, she was given a new position, which, she wasn't an employee. She had left the agency at chief of staff. He made a whole new position that never existed at $100,000 salary. And she
Who
took
was
that,
paying for this?
you, the taxpayers.
Under the sheriff's office,
Correct.
$100,000.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
And then Billy Huffer, Lieutenant Huffer, went from a deputy to a sergeant to a lieutenant in a year and a half. Normally, the policy stated that you have to be in your job or position for a minimum of 2 years. So if I was newly promoted to a sergeant, I would need to stay in my position for 2 years, and then I could test for lieutenant for the next position up. But it's a minimum of 2 years. Sheriff Elder changed the policy to 1 year for that one period to allow Billy Huffer, his friend, to test for lieutenant immediately within the first year. And then, of course, he got promoted because they're friends. I mean, nobody ever knew what the actual position entailed because it never existed before. So it's a whole new title that at the sheriff's office we never had. And from our understanding, she just did legislation type paperwork for following the bills and anything that affected law enforcement. And she kind of worked on that as well as being right next to the sheriff for anything and everything to help him.
Wow. All right. So this lieutenant, you reported. What comes next? You write a memo.
I write a
You
memo.
send it.
I
Yeah.
first call a lieutenant, my lieutenant that was over me prior to me he was my sergeant before I just got promoted as sergeant. So he was a lieutenant. He got promoted as well from sergeant to lieutenant. And then I got promoted to sergeant. So I knew he'd been transferred back to the jail. So I called him and explained what I overheard. And so that way he would make contact with the jail side because patrol in the jail detentions are two different people. I mean, it's like two different entities. Our lieutenants and sergeants really don't communicate back and forth as much as you would think. It's two different divisions. So I'm kind of reporting another thing into a different division. And so of course he calls up the ranks in his side and then calls me back and says, yes, you need to write up a memo on it and get it to me right away. And then the process started, the investigation or an IA on that sexual harassment.
Did anybody try to discourage you from writing this?
Not at the beginning. There was, while I was right after I reported it, I remember the very night there was a ceremony for a retiree, and I heard the sheriff talking to other people in there, making comments about the investigation, saying, how young girls can extrude something to the wrong direction when, they could ruin a man's career over something so petty. I mean, he was taking his friend's side over the actual offense that happens. And in the jail, there's cameras everywhere. So Jennifer Roybal was the victim of it. And she actually, had watched the video and knew the video existed. So there's proof of it. Jennifer Roybal's father is Joe Roybal, which is our current sheriff of the El Paso County Sheriff's Office.
Was this during a campaign? What's the reason to kind of downgrade this? Like say, it doesn't,
I mean, at the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of command staff that sexually harass people there. When they do finish the investigation against Billy Huffer, the biggest sexual harasser there is Commander King, and he's the one that writes a letter of counseling to Billy Huffer saying, even though your thoughts or intentions were in the right direction, your way of doing it was wrong. So, because what they tried to downplay the Pat search was that they were searching her for contraband, bringing tobacco products inside the jail. Inside the jail, there's a lot of deputies that chew tobacco. They smoke cigarettes. They'll go out into the yard that's inside the facility and smoke cigarettes because they're outside. They're not in the facility itself. I don't think anybody's tried to smoke a cigarette in there, but they do still chew tobacco. And what you have to watch out for is when they spit out their chew into a trash can, inmates will take that, dry it out, try to make a cigarette with it, and then smoke it. So that's why it's a big no-no to have it in there.
Who does the investigation when you file a complaint? Is it like another agency, the FBI, somebody
No,
from
it's actually done in-house by our internal affairs department. They do the investigation. Since this investigation, it has changed. It's an outside, the 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 county attorneys do the interview now, or do the investigation. So they changed policy after these continued mistakes the sheriff kept making. And so, but yes, it's our internal affairs that did it.
Is that typical of just about every police department that you know of in Colorado?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's usually always in-house. When there is a complaint put against you by policy, the agency notifies you of that complaint and an IA number is assigned to it. And then you have to make a memo or, talk about the incident of what occurred. Did something occur? Did something not occur? Do you not remember it? Or, because there's an investigation. So you're notified immediately when any complaints put against you.
Okay, so if you have this big camaraderie and you guys are all friends and hang out, could there be a conflict of interest, you think?
Absolutely. But you're supposed to not discuss it with people, but human nature and gossip, it will burn like fire through a dry grass area. So people find out and stories change. I know in his investigation, he tried to downplay it as he was looking for the chewing tobacco on her, but he reaches into her pocket, pulls out the chewing tobacco. But if that's the case, it would have stopped there. She probably would have gotten written up. No, Lieutenant Huffer makes a comment saying, "Ooh, you chew? That's hot." And then opens the canister, takes a pinch of it and puts it into his mouth inside the facility where you're not supposed to have the contraband. So that doesn't constitute a search for something being wrong, violating policy inside our jail when you make a
Yeah, and he
comment like
claimed that
that.
he claimed he didn't say hot, but that's uh, that's something I'm probably gonna upload those documents and have people read for themselves. What struck me, and I would like your opinion on it, is how it all turned against the victim.
Yeah. Well, I know during the investigation, I was pulled in, to say what I heard. My daughter was investigated for what she heard and, at that birthday party. My wife, being an employee, overheard. Plus, I talked to her on the way home, what she understood the conversation was about. So, it's a complete interview of all of us. And I do remember Jennifer Roybal and my daughter hanging out one day, and she says to me that her father, which is a current lieutenant at the sheriff's office, telling her to go in and say Keith misunderstood what I said, and that it was all a big misunderstanding, to eliminate it and just get squashed the whole investigation. And I think that's because of the pressure from the sheriff and his friendship with Lieutenant Huffer. And I looked at my daughter at that point and I said to her, I go, there is no promotion. There is nothing at this agency that would allow me to have you be groped or to cover it up if something like that happens for my own career or advancement at the agency. I just would not allow it.
No, absolutely, or minimize it in the way that they
Yes,
try to. Yeah, and did Jennifer ever approach you and tell you, "Hey, I don't want this public, I don't want this reported," or
absolutely
any?
not. No,
Okay,
nope. And
okay.
she cooperated with the full investigation, and I'm glad she did. She did not, back down. She did go in and tell the truth.
Yeah, and at some point, I guess they were, either even blaming the boyfriend
Yeah, the
at the
fiance.
time, the
Yeah,
fiancé, yeah, because he thought he needed to intervene. This lieutenant was for the sake of everybody. It's
yeah. Making comments
unfathomable.
that she needs a better boyfriend. She can do better than him, and that's inappropriate in itself. You shouldn't be making those comments to a subordinate in the jail. That's their personal life. It's got nothing to do. nothing to do with our ability to run our facility.
So what happens after you report it? So you send it and of course you hear this, and what comes next? You're still
After
working? You
I'm
thought
still
everything was
working.
normal. Okay.
My daughter's working, my wife's working. My daughter was a key person in the investigation because they're friends, obviously. They talk about situations that occur at work and what's going on in their personal lives. So once my daughter was pulled in for the interview, shortly after, I'm trying to move as a sergeant to another type of undercover position with the Vice and Narcotics VNI, and I'm on a ride along with another sergeant in CSPD because they kind of oversee our VNI department. Even though it's a joint task force with several other agencies, Woodland Park, it's kind of ran out of the Colorado Springs Police Department's building. So I was over trying to test for that, going through the process. And again, it's, you have to do interviews, you have to go meet the commander, you have to talk to other team members on the team to see if you're a fit. It's a process to get onto a specialized unit. But the night I was doing a ride along with a sergeant, my daughter calls me and she's super upset because she was just served with a write up, and she was served with a write up. She had to write a memo for cussing. And what had happened is an inmate had grabbed her arm, and she says, "Get your effing arm off me." And so they wrote her up for that and told the inmate to lock down. And she has that ability to do so because she is a security tech. She is in the wards. She has the right to, lock down an inmate if they're causing a problem. And I'm going to be honest with you, the F word and other cuss words if you watched cops or on patrol line, cuss words come out all the time when you're under stress. It just happens. Your adrenaline goes up and bad words come out. So so my daughter's crying and I'm like, "Well, did you say it?" And she says, "Yes." I said, "There's a reason why you said it. An inmate grabbed your arm." I said, "Just write the report on what happened." I go, "You have to be honest. They're not going to fire you for being honest." So she writes up a report, what occurred, and, they continue with their investigation. They interview the inmate. I don't know who all they interview, but, other people maybe inside that ward that, that he's housed in to see, if there was anything else that they missed. I'm sure they watched videos because, again, everywhere is videotaped inside the jail. So a couple weeks later, she gives me a call, even more upset. And at this point, they had the findings. She was pulled into Commander King's office, again, the one that writes Huffer's disciplinary action for the sexual harassment. But she is given a letter of counseling. A letter of reprimand. Counseling will fall off your record in 6 months to a year, where a letter of reprimand can never fall off of your disciplinary file. So she was given a letter of reprimand, 6 months probation, and then was ordered to take 4 hours of a communications type style class to learn how to talk to inmates.
Okay, so let me get this straight. She gets all of this, probation, everything, for an inmate touching her, which I am assuming they're not allowed to do.
Correct.
It is probably a very dangerous thing to allow that.
Yes.
And try to assert herself as a female, in a jail to say
In a
to
male's
frickin'
ward, even. It was a male inmate that grabbed
It
her
was
arm.
a male's word. Okay. So, to assert herself by using profanity, oh, well, big deal.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're not going to be shocked by that. But, I guess if you want to be a stickler for that, is she the only one at the prison using that, or at the jail do it?
No, I have heard lieutenants to commanders using those words. Like I said, it's not common, but anything under stress, you'll hear it. Or I heard a lieutenant yelling at someone in the lobby to get out of the lobby, using the F word multiple times to get them to get out of the lobby. So it happens. And when she said it, I was like, wow, that's a pretty harsh punishment for an inmate grabbing my arm. I said, if I was in the jail and an inmate would have grabbed my arm, it would have been far worse because I would have probably taken him to the ground. No inmate's going to touch me and grab my arm and do anything. And, if he let go immediately and I told him to lock down and yet it didn't lock down, again, there would be some kind of force I would use against him to put him back into his cell, at a deputy's level. So I
Yeah,
didn't see anything wrong with it.
that was my next question here. So if a male got, manhandled like that, I mean, it wouldn't be pretty.
No, because you got to remember in the jail, it's a society where the inmates will test the deputy. How far can they push things? How far can I get away with things? And they're testing us. I mean, they're watching us 24 hours a day. So it's a game to them. So when my daughter told me that, again, I was like, wow, that's harsh. She goes, well, the kicker is, she goes, do I know who initiated the complaint against her? I said, no. She said, Lieutenant Huffer. And I immediately went to that's retaliation because of, he got written up. Now I'm going to get you now. And so I explained to my daughter, that's retaliation. That's a Title VII. You don't go to IA and make that complaint. You have to do it through our county attorneys. So I told her, set up an appointment with our county attorneys and report it. So I go, this is supervisor to Caitlin, not dad to Caitlin. Even though I'm on a different division, policies don't change between the divisions. We have different SOPs, but the main policies don't change.
And if anybody that worked anywhere would come to you and ask you for advice on how to proceed, you'd have told them the same thing, I'm assuming.
Identical. I would have told them the same thing. What the avenue is to take to turn in that complaint.
Okay. All right. So what happens?
She goes to the county attorneys, makes the complaint on a Friday. And I remember her telling me it was Friday coming up, at the end of the week after she talked to me, because we talk daily. Well, and again, we're going to go back to where I was in the process of testing for VNI to go over to another specialized unit as a sergeant. Now, only two of us had put in for this position. Another sergeant that was newly promoted well after me, and then myself. And so as we're going through the process, we have the lieutenant call for oral boards, and to set this is like the final stage of the interview process of, who they're going to pick. Because then after that, the oral boards are done. It goes back to the commander at CSPD with the lieutenants. They all sit down and they, whoever scores highest, moves on. So I get a call from the lieutenant to set the oral board. I'm like, okay, yes, at this date, it was like Tuesday at 2:00. I go, perfect. That's fine. And then about an hour later, I get another call. He goes, oh, I had a meeting. I'm going to have to push you back to 3:00. I said, that's fine as well. And then about another hour later, the same lieutenant calls me again, Lieutenant Mitchell, and he goes, is there something you want to tell me? And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, I just got an interesting call from Commander Hatch, which is our commander over investigations at the sheriff's office, which is a commander over the VNI program, but is never involved in it. Like, again, it's ran mostly out of CSPD. The commander in CSPD oversees it. They're really, no one on that side is in the decision process of who comes to VNI. So I go, I don't know. He says, well, they called me and said that one of the two candidates was not moving forward. And he goes, well, which candidate is not moving forward? He goes, well, I'm not at the liberty to discuss that right now. He says, well, how do I tell them, I got to cancel the oral boards? And he goes, well, again, I'm not at the liberty to discuss it because it's being handled at the staff level. So when they say staff level from a commander, that's an undersheriff or a bureau chief, undersheriff, sheriff. There's only 3 more positions higher than that.
Okay, so this is somebody that can make the decision to say yes or no for the position you're applying for, right?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. And so they're saying basically that one of the candidates is going to, basically be stopped in the process. Any reason why at all, or any name that you find out later?
Well, as I'm talking to Lieutenant Mitchell, I go, well, I work today. So if there is a complaint against me, again, when you come into work, I may have to do briefing or whatever, get my guys out on the street. But after that, I'm going to be told either to come in and see the commander come in and see the lieutenant, and then I'll figure out what's going on. They'll say something to me where I have to write a memo. I go in that day and nothing. I mean, I don't even remember if a lieutenant was working, but the commander, it's a Friday. The commander comes in, tells me, "Hey, Keith, it's 5 o'clock, have a good weekend. If you need me, you have my number, give me a call." And I'm just thinking, well, what's going on? Why was I pulled from testing? What complaint or what has happened that I was pulled? And shortly after, I'm working on paperwork, doing time cards, reading reports. My daughter calls me and states, "Hey, I went to the county attorneys and HR and did my complaint." And that's when the light came on. I said, now they're not just retaliating against my daughter. Now they're retaliating against me because I told her to report the retaliation again of Lieutenant Huffer. So now they're jabbing at me to say, "Hey, you don't go against us," that kind of thing. And the light came on. So at that point, I started writing my memo because I could put two and two together that, if it's being handled at staff level, again, bureau chief, undersheriff, sheriff, we're right back up at the sheriff. Here's his best friend that made a complaint against my daughter, which she turned in for a retaliation. Now they're coming after me.
Okay. So did you ever imagine it's going to go this far?
No. I couldn't believe it. I was like, it is so blatant that, you could clearly see that that's what was happening. Between the two candidates, we're both equally qualified to do the job. It was on the crime reduction unit, which is very similar. We look for guns, pattern crimes, fugitives. V&I, they look for more prostitutes, narcotics, weapons, the same thing. And Sergeant Manzanilla was a deputy on the V&I previously. But the problem is he was violating policies and was kicked off V&I. So he was going in to purchase drugs and not staying in his car. He would get in the criminal's car, which is against policy, to go in to buy the drugs. So he was relieved, taken out of V&I. So he kind of has, if you think about it, a ding against him over me because he was removed from that position, even though he may know how the system works over there, but he still has, something, a bad, like
Bad record.
a bad record on it. Yeah. And I
Yeah,
have a clean
absolutely.
record.
Plus you said that you had seniority?
I had seniority as well as the sergeant.
Okay. So, and there were not complaints against you that we
None.
know of,
Zero.
correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. So what happens?
So then I file with the county attorneys and HR. Well, I kind of bypass HR. I go straight to our county attorney that is at the sheriff's office. Cause again, with working on the specialized units, we communicate more on a personal level. So I know we're a little better than, say, a line level deputy out on the street. So I make up my timeline from the day I put in my memo, copies of from my lieutenant. I'm the go-to guy. He would be a great asset to the V&I. I have all these referrals that are exceeds or above, to take that position. He would do excellent in that position. Letters of recommendation. And I send her all those and I show her the cutoffs and where I was in the process at, and then how this came down. And then I quoted the lieutenant of what he said. And I clearly stated, this is again another retaliation against me and my family. So I gave it straight to her, which she forwarded it over to the county attorneys. It never went through our human resources.
Okay. So now you're deep into it.
Yes.
Absolutely. So talk to me about the atmosphere at work and all of that.
After that, during the time they were doing an investigation, I kind of left out of town. I went on a 2-week vacation to Europe. So that was my last night that Friday. I wanted to make sure that my memo and my complaint was given to the proper people so that they could start these interviews, because I was given a list of names of different people, who to interview and who, things I overheard. And I reported all that, and I want them to do that investigation. They can do it while I'm gone. There's no reason. They have my whole story. I mean, date by date, time to time. I mean, a perfect timeline all the way to the point where I was told I'm not moving forward and the comments that were made. So after that, everything, when I came back from vacation, everything seemed to change. I would have like the sheriff would mad dog, just stare at me in a weird way, not communicate with me. I would go to shop with a cop, or I would go to coffee with a cop, or work the Special Olympics one, tip a cop. I was very active at our agency, and I would get, looked at differently, and no appreciation letters for doing those extra things where you normally would get a letter of appreciations and that kind of stuff. I was getting nothing. I was getting the cold shoulder from a lot of the higher ups, and it was just very awkward.
What about your peers, same level as you?
Yeah,
Did everybody, did it?
yeah, they would make comments to me because obviously they all knew. I had a sergeant go, why do you fight them? You're not going to win. Obviously, they're coming after you. Just kind of shut up and color is what he kind of told me. And I go, no, it's wrong. Just because I report something, I get retaliated against. I'm doing the right thing, and then I get bullied. That's completely wrong. I'm going to stand up for that.
Yeah, well, you're the unicorn because from experience, let me tell you, Keith, it is very hard to find somebody that can stand for the right thing and then talk and be, basically fearless about it.
Yeah. Well, and the other sergeant would go, well, you do have a business outside here. You have other incomes. I need this job. I need this retirement. And it's still, you can't allow these things to happen. Maybe I'm just cut from a different cloth, but I'm not going to allow it to happen to me or anybody else that would come to me and say it.
Yeah.
I'm going to stand up for them. I'll be the
Yeah, but it's
voice
not
for
it's
you.
not just that though. You have your daughter working in the jail
Yes.
and accidents can happen. Or the wrong inmate can be let out or
Yes. Well, yeah.
I mean, these are real,
It's
these are not
safety
TV
issues. Yes. Yeah.
yeah, these are not TV scenarios. People can get very vindictive.
Yes.
And, I want people to understand that the fear is real, There's a lot of people that have tried to, I guess, get interviewed and they back down, at the
There's
last moment.
several of them during this whole investigation that actually did that. And come to find out, once I started the lawsuit against them, because of course they unfounded my retaliation claim that nothing happened. It's just, Sergeant Manzanilla was a better fit, and that's it, plain and simple, and move
Of course.
along. But when I started filing lawsuits and started getting, all the interviews back, and I'm watching them, I'm seeing people that were retaliated against or yelled at because they want to represent a different sheriff that's running, and back a different sheriff. And they're screamed at and yelled at by Lieutenant Huffer at the county assembly, where we go in and vote for who's going to be on the ballot, and they have to make a certain amount of numbers. And the other elect that was running against Elder for his second term, Angley, they would yell at other delegates, get to pick who's going to be on the ballot. So it's a small percentage. Well, people getting attacked at the county assembly. I observe it. And again, I have a duty to report. I report it. And as soon as they do the interview, the deputy goes, I don't want to be part of it. So obviously someone got to him, and he was a sergeant. And within, I would say, a month, he was promoted to a lieutenant after he dropped the case of the harassment at the county assembly, because that's on a federal level, because you're pushing it against someone's right to vote, and it was against, again, Lieutenant Huffer, which he would get pretty excited and amped up if he knew somebody was going against Elder and voting, that it was an actual employee. So yeah, it's pretty fearless in that domain of politics.
So how long did you have to deal with this? Because this is through COVID, and I mean, this must have gotten pushed a few years, I imagine.
Well, it was well before COVID hit, because this was back in 2018.
Okay.
So when we're dealing with the delegate and doing that kind of things and voting, Lee does make it on the ballot. So now it's just not, one Republican on the ballots. Elder gets even more pissed that, here me as a active sergeant, I'm backing the other candidate openly on Angley's website because I just looking for someone that has integrity, honor, will, do the right thing when nobody's watching. And Elder is not that person. He just,
But it's your right to do that,
yeah,
right? You're a
correct.
citizen too. Okay.
Yeah. And yes, I'm not on the clock and I'm not in that police position at that point. This is my right as a U.S. citizen. So after that, we get into a tragedy in my life where on my wife's birthday in May of 2018, she suffers a massive heart attack, a SCAD of her LAD. And it only happens in females where her left artery, the widowmaker artery, the artery collapses, like the part of the wall collapses and blocks the entire blood flow. And on her birthday, she started having numbness in her arm. And so, I talked to her on the phone. I'm like, do you need, she didn't know what was happening. So I'm like, do you need to call an ambulance? I'm on my way home now. I was driving home. And then I get a call from dispatch saying, hey, your wife just called. She can't move. We do have AMR and fire heading to their house. But she told us she can't open the door. So at first I told him kick in the front door because she really never liked our front door, just make entry and get her medical help. But then as I'm on the phone with her, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I have a garage door code. You can put the door code in and walk right into the house. And so that's what they did. And so as she gets medical attention there, they transport her to the hospital. And as they exit out the vehicle, she goes into a full cardiac arrest where she actually, from the cardiologist said, that was doing the work, she had passed away for even 15 minutes, is that she had no activity and no blood flow. So they had to do compressions, bring her back and induce her into a coma. So at that point, when they had her somewhat stabilized, they were unsure of, what condition is to her brain. Is there any brain damage? They just don't know yet because she's in a coma. So at that point, I went on FMLA, so I'm at the hospital nonstop. And luckily, she pulls through with minimal, damage, which is pretty much unheard of with a
She
SCAD.
survived this.
She survived. And yeah, but it still was a long recovery, to kind of get back on her feet and get everything back in place. But yeah, it was pretty hard.
Did you get IA'd during this period?
I did not get IA'd, but they did start an investigation against me, at which time
Can you explain that? Because an investigation, as far as I knew, for law enforcement can only be done by internal
the internal
affairs.
affairs, correct. Well, by policy, if it's done by internal affairs, they have to notify me immediately of the complaint. Our sheriff and our county attorney, Diana May, hired Employment Matters out of Denver to do my investigation while I was on FMLA. So they start interviewing everyone around where I work in my patrol swing shift to my crisis negotiations unit. All of a sudden, I had all these complaints come up of where I wasn't doing my job or I made bad comments against the agency, and it just continued on.
Okay, so first of all, doing this during your leave, not notifying you. I mean, fair to say they're trying to fire you during
Correct.
FMLA leave,
Yes.
which is absolutely illegal.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. How did you find
And
out about this investigation?
well, as soon as I came back off FMLA, which I think it was 2 to 3 weeks, I don't remember the total amount. I think 3. The very first day I come in for my first briefing back on duty, I'm served with the investigation and that I have to report to be interviewed the next day by that Employment Matters company at the county attorney's office, which I thought was very strange.
The next day.
The next day, the very next day.
Did they offer you legal representation, or the FPPA was going to cover you?
No,
Next day is a pretty
none. But I
quick
already had an
turnaround.
attorney representing me in the federal lawsuit against Sheriff Elder and the El Paso County Sheriff's Office for the retaliation and the 26th Amendment for the voting.
Yeah, but that's a different, I mean, and you don't have anybody scheduled.
Correct.
Right. So
no, I have no one. They give you your Garrity right there. You have to comply with the investigation. You have to answer the questions, and I agree to it.
can you
So it
tell
was
people what Garrity is as opposed to, a
well,
normal civilian?
yeah. By law enforcement, you have to cooperate in the investigation, regardless of your guilt or innocence. You have to answer their questions,
Or else
regardless,
what?
or you'll be terminated immediately.
Okay. Okay.
So
So you show up with somebody or alone?
I show up with my attorney. I obviously, as soon as I'm served that, I go out into the parking garage. So again, I'm not inside the building with the cameras that can hear me directly. I call my attorney. He was under the understanding with Diana May that there was nothing happening, nothing weird was going to happen when I came back to work. And yet they attacked me immediately. And he says, wow. So he clears his schedule to make sure he's there at that interview, and plus sent Diana May an email saying, really, you told me that, there was nothing going to happen. So they, after I come back in, after talking to my attorney, they gave me the night off. They told me with pay, they just go ahead, cause I was hit with that. The lieutenant goes, just go home, so you can get ready for the interview tomorrow. And they allowed me to go home, which again, I thought was weird. Like I can still work, even with this stress. I have the ability to know what my job is, but they sent me home. And so the next day I come in, and again, I talked to my attorney on the way over there as I'm driving, and he's like, oh yeah, they're just going to do this interview and then everything supposedly is going to be good. I said, okay. So I go in. The interview takes 2.5 hours. They're asking about incidences I've never even heard of. I mean, I do recall the calls for service, but there was never any complaints. And this is at this time, late June of 2000, because my wife had the heart attack in late May. So when I'm looking at these are incidences from January, February, when I was, still on duty until that May 23rd.
But you never
Why
heard of them ever,
never heard a complaint that there was anything wrongdoing happening. And then there
just
was
till
a
you got
couple
back.
till I got back. And then they brought up an incident of we had an inmate escape from a female deputy's custody at the hospital. Somehow the cuffs were up front. He took off running, but we were able to get him again. And they were stating that I arrived super late. I didn't leave the office right away. I didn't respond to a rapidly evolving situation, which is completely false. So it was just all these different incidences. I clearly remember them, but they had a different outlook of, what occurred versus my version. And so again, that took 2.5 hours. But before that, let's go back to when I walked in. The original complaint was not responding to emergent calls, I think was what I was going to be interviewed about. Then when I got reserved with a new complaint of my job performance. So they added on to it within 24 hours that now I wasn't doing my job either. I wasn't reading reports and I wasn't doing my time cards and this kind of stuff. But again, I haven't been to work in, 3 weeks. So it was just very strange that all these complaints were thrown against me.
The strangest part for me is that you never heard of them. Nobody
Never.
ever talked to you, never had a counseling session, never
Nothing.
had,
Not a lieutenant came to me. Nothing.
never written up.
Nothing.
I mean, you
Never
had
pulled
evaluations,
aside.
I imagine,
Yeah.
work performance evaluations that everybody
Yes.
gets
And
at least
they
once
all
a year.
everything exceeds. And this was my 3rd year as a sergeant. So it's nothing new. I'm not, a pretty rookie sergeant. But yeah, all of a sudden I had all these complaints against me, which I was like, wow, where did this all come from?
Okay, so here's something I would like people to know, because a lot of officers, and I hope, this gets far and wide because you have the credibility, that this is what they do.
They do.
This is exactly what they do to try to break you, to try to get you in your pocketbook, to try to get you in your job, to have you lose all your seniority and your pension and whatever else you got going for you, right?
And they just want you to quit and give up the fight, not fight them, because it just looks like a larger entity coming at you, and they're coming at you at every direction. And what's funny too, just came up in my mind, was one of our female sergeants. I'm not going to say what shift she worked on, but because I don't want to identify her out, but she came to me and said, while you were gone, they were asking, of looking for anything that I could have screwed up, from the smallest thing, that, did they observe anything that would violate policy? I mean, they were that blatant that they went around and asked different deputies, sergeants on the patrol division to find anything and everything that they could write up.
And this person was the only one who had the guts to go and tell you
me,
to your face,
yes,
this is what they did.
This is what they did. And then, yeah.
What about your daughter? How's she doing in the meanwhile? Is she still working at the prison?
She's still working inside the jail.
Okay, or jail.
It was very tough because she was under a microscope. She did the 6 months probation. She learned the policies. That was actually a new thing. She did the communications class. Commander King, here we go again with their great integrity, pulled her into his office and says, "Hey, Caitlin, if you're going to play in the game, you better know the rules. So I want you to read all these policies. And when you're done reading the policies, come back to me and explain them to me so I know you know the rules to the game." And then send her out of the office. And of course, every time they make contact with her, there's someone else in there, not just the commander, either a sergeant or lieutenant. So there's another eyewitness. So she can't make a secondary complaint, which again, I told her, hey, that's good for you too, because he can repeat what was said exactly in the verbiage and the tone and the inflection of their words to how they're bullying you to read policy and that kind of stuff. And I said, that's a great point, Caitlin. So I sent her. I said, yeah, that's a great point. I said, you know what you need to do? You're a civilian. You have different rules. And he's absolutely right. You're not a sworn. So you need to go to HR and get the employee handbook, because your employee handbook is different than ours. And she says, why? I said, again, so your disciplinary actions are different. So they get stuck in their groove over there thinking you're sworn or in that, and they run you through a disciplinary action that's totally different and not right, and you don't know any better. So I remember Caitlin went over to HR, goes in the office and asks for an employee handbook. And the girl at the front desk, goes, I don't know where that would be. So she gets up, and goes back to a supervisor in another cubicle, right? As she's walking away, she stops and turns and says, "What's your name?" And my daughter said she just felt all the blood drop to her stomach, like she goes, "I don't even want to say my name." And so she says, "Caitlin Duda." And then she said it looked like that game, the Gophers, heads popped up over the cubicles, like, what, who? And then of course the supervisor comes out and takes her into the back, into her office, and sits her down and says, "Caitlin, what do you need?" She goes, "I need a copy of the employee handbook." And she goes, "Why?" She goes, "Well, I want to read it." And of course they called the county attorney while she's in there. So she has her on speakerphone. And I'm thinking to myself, why do they have an employee handbook? Why do they have the county attorney on the phone asking you the same question? Why do you need it? And so they gave it to her, and she walks out and she calls me immediately. She says, "Oh my God, I was sweating. I hate it. Why do you make me do these things?" I said, "Caitlin, it's your right." Because they're so young, they're in their 20s. I go, "You need to know these things." And I said, "Oh, don't worry." I said, "The county attorney's got it coming to them because they haven't read it either." I said, "So they're trying to figure out what you're going to use against them that's in that book." So I said, "You just gave them something to read for the next 2 days." And she kind of gave her a smile.
Of calling her into the office for just an employee handbook.
Correct.
That everybody who's worked in HR knows that if an employee comes in, you hand it to them.
Yes,
and they did. And they did have it, right?
Yes, they did have it. But the one girl at the front didn't know. But all of a sudden she's in with the supervisor and the county attorney on the phone. It's like, it made me laugh because, I'm older, mature. I'm thinking, oh yeah, you just poked the bear. And they're wondering what is in that book that they don't know about. So it made me feel good anyway.
Yeah. What is Keith going to get us on?
Yeah, exactly. Because they knew it wasn't her.
Absolutely not. But even, even in the best scenario, once you decide to fight the system, you're looking at a couple of years, 3 years, 4 years
Yes.
down the
And that's
road,
where
right?
COVID came into play, where our federal trial kept getting kicked back because of COVID, and they weren't allowing trials. And so it did start getting kicked back after that, because it does take us a couple years, but then it added even a couple more years onto it.
And they were that ignorant that you having, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I mean, it is ignorant of a city attorney
County attorney.
a county attorney, still
Yes.
an attorney.
Well, it's attorney.
With a Juris Doctorate
Which now
degree.
is, you believe it or not, a judge, and she has no integrity whatsoever. Will lie to you straight to your face. But yeah, she is a judge. She was appointed to a judge position.
Appointed. Okay. Yeah, that's understandable, of course. Okay. So, I mean, to not know that you have filed something, they should leave you alone, because that is the proof of retaliation, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That what they did, it's unreal to me. Your story is like literal handbook. We should write a handbook of how to fight the system and what to expect.
And be prepared for this or be prepared for that.
Yeah,
And,
exactly. Wow. Okay. So in the meanwhile, are they now actively trying to fire you? Did they get to?
They eventually did, yes. After they did that investigation, they came back from Employment Matters. They gave his report. He said, it was more likely to have done this and less likely to do this one. They went down the long line of the 5 different complaints. And because of the 3, I was on paid administrative leave. Well, during that time, I did an interview similar to this, but during that investigation was completed. So there is no true IA. I did an interview for the Colorado Independent, which is a magazine there in Colorado Springs, and they lost their minds after that, because I made statements on there of what had occurred, the sexual harassment. I'm letting the public know, that this is what's going on there, and they're trying to sweep it under the rug. Well, they didn't like that. They said, now I'm back in another investigation for violating the keeping it quiet, but the IA was complete, or the investigation was complete, because they gave me the findings.
Okay, but here's the question though. I mean, you're supposed to get investigated via IA and notified.
Correct.
That you have an investigation. How do they reconcile that?
Well, this one, they called me on my phone because I'm on paid leave and I have to be available. And they served me again that Employment Matters is conducting the investigation regarding this, and I need to report on this day at this time. And I do. And I come with legal representation when we did it. And what's funny is, let's talk about the Employment Matters. It's a company out of Denver that did my investigation. It cost the county $15,000. I had the breakdown. So they paid $15,000 to get me fired by hiring an outside company to investigate me. And I also had emails between that county attorney, Diana May, with statements like, he goes, on October 10th, 2000, I think it was 16, they amped up their investigation on me. All of a sudden, my attorney's like, well, what was the significance of October 10th? And I couldn't think of anything. I'm like, I don't know, because Diana May sent an email to the gentleman at Employee Matters and said, hey, I got one you need to look into. I'll get with you on Monday. So, because we were subpoenaed all the emails, interaction between them.
And just for viewers, with your permission, I will upload that so that they can see this for themselves, that this is not just you talking. This is legal stuff that went all the way to, what was it, the 10th Circuit?
Yes, Supreme Court. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a federal issue that was thoroughly documented.
Yes. And so when she replied that, of course, the interactions is, give my name in investigating them. And then during the investigation, they have another email correspondence back and forth. This is again with the county attorney. How deep in the weeds do you want me to get on this guy? This is what he actually writes in the email. So it clearly states that they're hunting me. They're trying to find anything they can to get me fired. So I was floored by these emails and how blatant they would just do it instead of a phone call or something else. Why would you do it via email where there's a trail?
And the 15 grand that they
Yeah.
spend taxpayers' money
Yes.
on it.
That's a lot of money. And just so they don't have to notify me of me being investigated, that's the reason they did it, because they wanted to search out things, any kind of small thing, and try to make it bigger than what it was, or false allegations and put them towards me, you know. And
I
a lot
mean,
of people, go ahead.
let's call it what it is. They wanted to skirt the law,
Correct.
legally bypass
Yes.
the requirement to let you know you're in an investigation, which is where you're right.
Yeah.
You're not the first person, by the way, that tells me that.
Yeah.
CSPD has a history of doing that.
And they're very good at it. I mean, they almost go to the same school when they get promoted to how to skirt by the law and do weird things. But, you know, I found it very funny. And again, you can upload these complaints, but all the people that complained against me were friends of the sheriff. They all got promoted. They went from deputies to sergeants to lieutenants currently right now. So they all were given something in return for their blatant wrongful statements against me. So they were all compensated. The same with the guy at the delegate thing. He was promoted to lieutenant, and he's, you know, he's happy as a hog. He's got going to have a great pension. He's been promoted, but they all had paybacks. They all were able to promote up. Even my own lieutenant that gave me a stellar referral for V&I, he was promoted to commander because he made one statement in there that I was passing out political signs with our company or my police vehicle, which is false, completely false. But yeah, he was promoted to commander. Plus, he put Elder's political sign in the back of his pickup truck at the delegate thing out at the street. So they all were compensated for their help to get Elder reelected for a second term.
So lying to give a false statement, like literally, you know, just making false evidence.
Yeah.
Gets you
Allegations.
promoted.
Yeah. Got him promoted. Yep. And it can
That is
clearly, you know,
insane.
I disproved all of them. And, you know, I could show, you know, like the one I left late from the office. I had the background where they were using CAD, which is a kind of a dated system that tells me when I log in, when I do things on the computer. Well, the computer was, you know, our computers were garbage. They would take forever to reboot up. So I'm listening and I'm already moving towards the call. And so they show me when I go in for my deposition, you know, this memo, and it's got a cutout of CAD put in there, and I'm asking questions. You know, they don't like me asking questions because they told me pretty much to shut up. We're here to ask questions, not you. That's what they told me. But I would say like, well, who said this? Because again, it's a rapidly evolving situation. So there's people saying on the radio, hey, I just saw somebody go over a fence here, or, you know, I'm up front here, I'm here, you know, and we also have CSPD units there. We had EPSO units there. Everybody's trying to catch this guy on the run. So when it came down to it, and I'm looking at it and I'm looking at the time and I'm like, there's no way I can prove, you know, because he kept asking me, how long does it take the computer to boot up? And I'm not going to give him a set time. I'm on disposition. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you know what? When I leave the parking structure, we have a parking garage. I have to scan my card to come out with my vehicle. And so I said, that will tell you what time I left the office. And of course, they all, you start glowing like, oh yeah, we got him. And so the Campbell, their paralegal, takes off running to go get that data, and come to find out, you know, they said I left 10 minutes after the lieutenant. I actually left 10 minutes before the lieutenant because I opened the gate before him. And so they were done with that. They didn't ask me any more questions about that one. It's just, it was so priceless. It's like they built these big stories and form them into what they want it to be, but they don't want to use reality and better software and things that'll tell the truth. But I think they weren't ready for me either, that I think outside the box.
No, I can't imagine. You know, a lot of people have told me they go into IA, they, you know, sweat them out and they yell at them and
They do.
all of these things. But you are such a chill person and
Yeah.
so
And that's exactly how I
proper
was in the deposition.
and so calm. They must have had a run for their money, which is
Yeah.
great.
And my
Yeah.
attorney he's not allowed to say anything really. And he would just sit over there and chuckle. He would just laugh. He's like, well, we're done with that one. It's make comments like that. It's the same with when I didn't respond to a shots fired call where somebody's shooting a gun in a district in our South District. And I was on the very far west side by Manitou. And the lieutenant says that a North sergeant saw me pass him on a road. So I get called in or they have another situation where they said I didn't respond to a shots fired call in our South District. I was all the way on the west side by Manitou. I had a sergeant, which again, he had 3 of those complaints against me, filed against me.
Same sergeant.
Same sergeant, which they were all unfounded. But he said that I passed him on a road of North Powers when he was going to that call at Constitution and Powers. And so I asked him, I said, well, how is that possible? I'm on the very far side of town. It'd take me a half an hour to get across there. And this sergeant's saying he saw me in 5 minutes. I would have had to be doing 125 miles an hour or plus to get over there. And that's just not possible. Even with traffic, it's not possible to go that fast. And so I questioned them. And of course, they're like, well, we don't know. I'm like, well, it's not possible. There's no way. So we asked the lieutenant that wrote the memo, did you verify this? Did you look at, our vehicles are tracked? Did you look and see if the vehicle, actually crossed paths? He goes, no, I just took the sergeant at his word. I'm like, so you didn't even investigate it to even prove that it was really happened or occurred, because in reality, it can't. The timeline doesn't fit. Again, that one was done in the deposition. It's just that's how far-fetched their complaints were, that they were so wrong, that it was so blatant that it's like, how? I can disprove this just with your own software and your own stuff that monitors us.
So what did they finally pin you on? What worked for them?
They said on the final firing was that I used my private business. I used it while at work, drumming up business. So while I was on duty, I conducted private businesses because I owned a painting and construction business. The other one was they held me for poor performance, not doing my reports, not reading reports. And then they tried to pin me on that political sign thing, saying that, it's more likely that I had signs in my vehicle. Oh, and I forgot the last one. I did call in a sign being stolen by a Fountain PD officer. I had a female that lived down south, and there's yard signs, during the election in June, and this female observed someone get out of a car, a Fountain PD car, out of the passenger side, pick up the sign and throw it in the back seat and take off. So I called into dispatch and asking, who's the Baker unit for Fountain that night? Cause I'm a sergeant. And I said, cause they stole a sign out of a yard. Well, they felt that was the abuse of my authority as a sergeant, that I was off duty and not working. I'm reporting a crime of someone stealing a sign. And they said that I violated my authority as a sergeant, and they found me guilty of that one.
Whole bunch of made up stuff. That's basically what they fired you on.
Yes.
Okay. And for those people who are listening, feel, because I'm sure lots of them have told me that they feel horrible, that they get fired, that they get put through the ringer on made up allegations. I mean, it's just, it should be a badge of honor, if you ask me.
Yeah. Well, and what's funny is when they, remember I told you they served me. I had to come down and I had a new interview because of the one. Well, they fired me right after that interview. That's when I got served with my final termination paperwork on that second. And as they hand it to me, here's the lieutenant of IA hands me my termination letter with all those items written on it. And I'm reading it and I look at the date. It's dated 2 days prior to the date. So in reality, the investigation wasn't even completed yet because I'm here at the investigation, and they already typed my letter up of termination 2 days before. And I pointed it out to my attorney. He says, that doesn't surprise me. So then, of course, for our lawsuit, he gets the record of, the hidden, the back stuff to WordPerfect, where it tells you what terminal it's written at, when it was started, the date and time when it was made, and it was all yes, done at the county attorney's office 2 days prior, early afternoon, well before the investigation was even completed or I was even interviewed or was already terminated. And
Wow.
so that didn't help them either. And they're not smart
Wow.
enough to change the date and do it the right date. They already had it planned. They wanted me gone, period.
It's very interesting to me that you say that, because I've had quite a few officers. I'm not going to say what department, but many of them got in trouble with, double paying back pay, basically, because, some have extra insurance or whatever.
Oh yeah.
If something happens, you know about those insurance in case you get hurt or whatever. So they literally, after they separated or retired, what have you, they would get a bill from the city or the county
Want money
telling
back?
them, yes, absolutely, with no explanation whatsoever of why were the tallies that way, right? Who entered that? So they were claiming that many of these officers, like I said, different departments actually, had entered on the time card themselves. Well, some of them weren't even there, right? So there's a great attorney who helps quite a few of them and said, well, get an actual, what you're saying, printout of the computer entry. It exactly happened.
It
When did
tells
it
you.
happen?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. To basically hand you the case.
Yeah.
They just give you a gift.
Yeah. And on the bottom of my letter, it says I had to meet with the sheriff at that point, not in the future. If I wanted to talk to him about my job, I had to immediately leave from where I'm at after this interview and go directly to the sheriff and meet with him right then. And there's no reason for that. I mean, I turned it down. I was like, no.
What does that, what does,
Just so he can yell at me, or I don't know what his backing for it was. I guess to give me my opportunity to plead my case on why I should continue to be employed. And we all
beg
know, yeah,
for
to
your
beg.
job?
Yes. And I was like, no, thank you. I will pass. I go, this was already dated 2 days ago. And what's funny is they already had my final paycheck already done. They handed it to me with that letter. So get this. And then on top of that, I go home, I take all the information. I'm sitting there thinking, I go, I just did a 2-hour interview after the fact. So I'm on the
Yeah.
clock. I am still an employee. So I call up payroll and make them pay me the 2 hours. And they go, are you serious? That's what the lady in payroll said to me. Are you serious? I go, yes, I was told to be there by the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. And to that point, you were saying I was still employed until you handed me my letter of termination. So yes, I do want my 2 hours. Oh yeah.
My
So she
God.
goes, I will have to call you back. So she had to go talk to a supervisor and then calls me back and goes, yeah, we'll cut you another check. I go, absolutely. Thank you. You can mail it. But just again, I got to poke the bear a little myself, but yeah, they were none too pleased with me.
Oh, that was fantastic. Wow. Okay. Now you're out of there. Thank God.
Yeah.
Did your wife go back to
My
work?
wife continued to work there. They really didn't mess with her. Shortly after, they kept the other sergeants and people were riding my daughter and watching her. If she had a cell phone in the building or something else, and she couldn't deal with it anymore. So she decided to quit, and so she did.
And so let's go back to that episode with your wife. So she comes out. Thank God she's well to this day. And what happened? Like, did they show up? Did they stop harassing you? Did they call? Did they send flowers? Did they?
No. When my wife was in the hospital, they did not show up. They didn't, usually you'll see fundraisers because, a heart attack, I mean, that's 100,000 plus, operation, if not more. I don't remember what the total bill was, but it was up there. It was a lot of money. It could have even been $250,000 with the time she was in the hospital and all the surgical procedures. There was no fundraiser done like they do for everyone else there at the office. We were like blackballed there. I do recall at one time she was there. She did have a stroke while at work, and she was transported because the stress. She does let the stress get to her, and so she'd had a stroke. And she clearly reminded me when she was there, One of the lieutenants rode with her in an ambulance, was a close neighbor to us, so he was a good friend. She goes, they asked her to pick up her foot, and she couldn't. And so she uses her other foot to pick up her left foot. And they're like, no, you can't do that. She's trying to prove that, nothing's happening. But I will say one thing. Even before I got there, the former chief of police for CSPD, Pete Carey, was there. He looked disheveled, and he was sitting in the lobby, with my, where my wife, they notified him, not Elder, not anyone else, because he was the current undersheriff, but he was there, and he made it clear, if I needed anything, he knows what's going on, and sorry, our family's going through all this, but really, from Keith to Pete, Pete to Keith, if you need anything, do not hesitate to reach out to me. So I felt pretty good about that. I mean, at least he showed up, because he looked like he hadn't shaved in 2-3 days, like he'd been working in a yard for the whole weekend. But yeah.
The only person to show up.
Yes.
Wow.
And that's on the second incident, not even her heart attack. That was on the stroke.
Wow.
Yeah. So no other supervisors,
so much
no
for
one else.
Family and camaraderie.
Yeah.
Nobody showed up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So see, that's another thing, the isolation that you guys all experience. Most cops live cop 24/7, right? Like you said, your daughter,
we're always,
your daughter joined right out of high school, you were telling me earlier. You said, for her friends all work there. It's a real family. And to think that in the moment of greatest need, you guys were alone.
You got to put that aside and, come and help your family. But that did not happen. We were blackballed. And like I said, even when Deputy Flick on May 5th got killed before my wife had her heart attack, I remember I was in the procession. I was off that day. And as soon as I heard about it, I went home. And I'm not looking for compensation for the time. I put my uniform on. I get in my marked vehicle. And I came to be in part of the procession from the hospital to the coroner's office. And as I'm standing there and the hearse is pulling into the coroner's office, I'm standing there with a friend, another deputy and stuff. And it's a hard time. You just lost one of your coworkers. And here comes the sheriff walking out after they're all done. We're all still standing there. And all he does is stare me down like if he could kill me, he would right then. And the female deputy standing next to me goes, wow, if I wouldn't have seen that myself, I wouldn't have believed it happened. I said, that's how much hate he has for me. He won't even communicate with me. And this is why I was still, I was still on duty, working, but, employed. But yeah. And I go, this is what I've been dealing with since I've started this complaint. Everywhere I go, every public event, this is what I get. Even in the hallways of the sheriff's office, where on the 3rd floor, if he was there and we cross paths, it is a death stare of hatred towards me.
I know, what happened with Micah Flick and, other deputies that were gravely injured. It is heartbreaking, the way, some of them were treated, to be honest with you. This is partly why I always wanted to get a story on EPSO. EPSO is very hard to break through.
Yeah.
That's
they
why I'm
scare
calling
them.
you.
They scare them very, very much. And you will not have a pension or a job. And they put the biggest county attorney bullies on you that they can. They try. They try to intimidate me. And I just kind of sat back and yeah, no.
So let's explain to people what the side business is, since you mentioned it and they used it against you, and how many years you were doing this.
I'd been in business since 1995 in Colorado Springs. I started working there in 2006. When they did their background investigation, they were well aware of my painting and construction business. Throughout my career working at the sheriff's office, I've had commanders, the previous sheriff Makita, I do work for him, undersheriffs, the just line level people to sergeants, to retired people. I would do all kinds of work for officers there because they feel safe that they have another officer in their house, that nobody's going to take something. And what's funny is after they fired me for that, is one of my firing things. It wasn't even 4 months later, I get an email from someone in the jail sends me an email that went out SHR. That means across the sheriff's office email. Everybody that has an SHR email gets it, saying got skills was in the comment line. And then below it, if you don't have that email, I'll send it to you. It says, do you have a special skill? Do you do drywall, work on a car? Do this, do that, trim trees. The sheriff wants to put a list together so people feel comfortable with, who they're working with. And I'm like, it's not even months later. Here he is trying to compile a list in the secretary. His secretary sent it out that he wants to put a list together of people that do outside things like photography or whatever your special skill is. And they sent it out as HR.
So let me get this straight. So they ding you for doing, painting and remodeling or whatever for officers.
It was one email from a woman that worked in records. She sent an email asking me, she goes, I understand you own a painting business. I go, I do. If you want an estimate or something, here's my cell number. You can call me. And that way, that was it. That's the extent of the email.
Yeah, because that way it doesn't happen during work hours.
Correct.
It just happens when exactly.
I just gave her my direct cell number. That's the extent of it.
I know of another officer who got dinged for literally one email for something he replied to a friend that took maybe, I don't know, 7 words. It's insane. When they want to find something on you that's ridiculous like that, they do. But I can't imagine, security, you want somebody to redo your daughter's room or what have you. You don't want just anybody walking into your house and getting the layout of your house. You become a target. It makes sense to have somebody from within. And
I'm not the only people that do side things at the sheriff's office. I mean, there's people that photography to other electricians to framers. I mean, there's a whole gamut of people that do side work, because to earn extra money. But yeah, they just picked me up because of the one email.
No, that's because they wanted to get rid of you. Yeah. I mean, they needed an excuse, right?
No, and during that time, when the very first time they walked me out when they put me, when I did the first interview, I came back from FMLA and they walked me out from the county attorney's office. They snatched up my sheriff's office cell phone, my Apple phone, and they celebrated it and checked it for any kind. Was I using it for business? Who I was calling? They ran full records on it. They ran tracking records on it to see where the phone had been. Oh yeah. It's like, what are you looking for? I don't use my work phone for personal stuff, but a commander does, a lieutenant does. Sometimes they give up their extra work phone, then just keep the work phone. And that was part of the deal back in the day, prior to Elder. I don't know if he changed it, but you could pay a certain portion of the cell phone and use the cell phone. But again, it could be subpoenaed at any point. And, they tell you shouldn't want your personal data or anything on there. So that's how I treated it. I didn't use it for personal because it could, if I get in a shooting, that phone's gone. And who knows what's on it? You don't want to have, some side chick or girlfriend or naked pictures or something stupid, because don't look at me because that's what some cops do. They do those crazy things. But yeah, you don't want any of that on your phone, especially.
Yeah, Keith, I know they do those things.
So, and they get caught every time. It's like.
When it doesn't matter.
Yeah. What were you thinking?
It doesn't matter.
Well, it doesn't if who you are, but
yeah,
if it was me, it would have mattered.
Yeah, well, that's what they were praying for.
Yeah, they would have put that in the Gazette, the local newspaper.
Absolutely. And then you're calling for your last paycheck. That is just poetic. So what happened with this lawsuit?
Well, they ultimately settled at $185,000.
Ooh, that must have hurt.
I'm sure they wanted me to be able to not talk about it, but I would never sign that. There's no way. I put it on the news the next day. I was on Channel 5, Channel 13. I had it in the Gazette on the front page. I blasted them as fast as I could in the media because people need to know that your taxpayers' money just paid me to walk away. I wanted to take it to trial, but between my wife and my daughter, they're the ones that talked me out of it because it's just too stressful for them. To me, it didn't bother me, but to them, it stressed them out a lot. And I'm not saying it didn't stress me because we didn't talk about where I had heart issues either at the end of 18 after I got fired in June. by December, I was getting stents put in my heart and in the hospital for weeks. It did cause stress, but I try to hide it a little better. But it still it affects you. I'm not going to lie. It affects every aspect of your life.
Yeah, I think your hostage negotiator skills probably play
It
into that
does.
cool.
It
Yeah,
actually does.
absolutely.
If you went on some of the calls with us and was listening in, you'd most people would panic when you hear the stuff people say, and you're like, you have to be calm, and you can't let them agitate you, and it's tough. But yeah, I think so. But it's still deep down inside, it still gives you stress.
They wanna put you through ringer so that you quit. Yeah, definitely. But you got this the best part, let's talk about the findings of the court and what they found out, how they had violated your rights,
They did,
and the
and
chastising that the judges.
did to them, saying,
Oh,
"You
yeah.
excessively violated this man's civil rights." And they did. They were strongly in my favor, and I think that's kind of what pushed him onto the settlement. And but yeah, they were not. I mean, the sheriff's office tried everything to get it kicked out. They were coming up with all kinds of crazy motions, and but then once it went to the three judges in the Supreme Court part, they were like, oh no, you better rethink this because you have grossly, that's what the words they used, was grossly violated this guy's civil rights. You better step back and reevaluate.
Yeah, you probably would have had a great case for court, but it's not worth the stress, plus you don't need
No.
it. And see, that's the thing. That's
Yeah.
what really saved you because you didn't need it.
I
Financially, you
didn't
didn't
need it.
need it.
It's just to show them you can't bully everybody and get away with it. I wanted more like, just stop what you're doing. Cause now there's nobody getting harassed with political backing another political party in this last race. There was no issues. Not a one person was talked to about it. They didn't even bring it up because they realized that's a sore subject to be telling people you can't talk about something when it's your constitutional right. I didn't want to push too, not just for my family, other coworkers that would have to
Mhm.
testify, and they're going to get retaliated against, and they're in the same position where they need their retirement. And so I didn't want to put them through it either, because once you go under oath, you have no choice but tell the truth. Or, I have other statements, from you. So you don't want to perjure yourself. Then you're not a cop anymore. So it's just very stressful for them. So I just chose to take that easier path.
So let's talk about that for a second before we cut this first interview first, because you'll have another one. Let's talk about how they actually go and write reports and do all this, but they're doing all these bad things. They're going after girls, that they use the legal system as a
To
weapon
do that. Yeah, and
to do
just
that.
just because their power, they get to a point where they think they're untouchable and we can do whatever we want. It's in any politics, and it's time to take that back and hold people accountable. I don't care what level you're at. You need to be held accountable if you're breaking the law. I'm not going to lie for a promotion to have you keep climbing the ranks. Yeah, so I won't stand behind it.
No, and you didn't. And it's, I'm lucky to have met you. You're not just a wonderful individual, but extremely brave. My God. And your daughter is too. And so is your wife. You guys
Yes,
were, I mean, crusaders, because this lawsuit was both you and your daughter,
correct.
right?
It was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that is fantastic.
Yeah. And in the
Fearless.
second interview,
Absolutely.
I can share like verbatim from some of the memos, and that way they can get a feel for, the audience can get a feel for how ridiculous these complaints were about me and how far off they were. So I don't say it wrong for someone. I'm going to read it from the memo that they wrote and how ridiculous it can be that, or even our county attorneys would believe that a story this bad. It's like, are you kidding me? Ridiculous.
Let's do that, because you can put context to that. And I would, absolutely love to do that. And then we can make that public as well.
Yes.
That is great.
No, I'm not pulling their legs or making things up. I have documentation.
No, you absolutely are not. Anybody can Google it and find out what you did. And, I think that if a lot of people knew about you and your story, they wouldn't be so afraid.
I
Or
think so. Give them a little more courage.
right. And at least they would plan to, maybe have a little side hustle that they can have as a backup in case
Yeah.
something goes down.
Yeah.
I'm just a cop's mom. Honestly, what is the heartbreaking part is that they find themselves all alone, in a profession that they gave their lives to. That they give their lives to
their
every day.
coworkers will even turn on them because they don't believe it. They even listen to the false information and actually believe it and then look at you in a different light. And it's like, I clearly go, no, I'm telling you, I'm doing the right thing and they're telling you something totally different. And if you want to believe that, you can, but I'm going to prove it. And that's what I would tell people because I was, even with friendships. So when I would go to the business, he would tell me I needed to call ahead to make sure no one was there from another agency, another police chief, another commander or someone, because he was doing vehicle work on CSPD, Palmer Lake, Monument, our office. So because I was in that active lawsuit against them, we're the best of friends. He goes, I got to feed my family. So he shunned me from coming to his business because it would upset the other people. And I'm like, hey, I'm the one in the right here. But he goes, I know, but I still can't have you come here because people don't understand our friendship. I said, you don't stand up and say, hey, that's got nothing to do with my business here. He's my friend, but he wouldn't do that. No. So, I mean, it spanned from all levels. It's disheartening from, when you have friends like that even do that to you.
Well, we're here to have their back. And thank you, because without you, there is no back to have. You guys have the stories. This is real. I mean, it's sad. It's a face of law enforcement that nobody has ever talked about because there's a real wall there. Nobody wants to talk about it ever,
No, they don't.
and just sweep it. And I just don't think it's the right thing mentally for officers. It must be really hard to work in a place like that. They can do that to you.
It can be very stressful.
Yeah, Keith, I am forever in your debt because you're wonderful, to trust me with this. I can't wait for the second part because that's when it's going to get really juicy.
Yes. We'll get to the meat and potatoes, as they say.
Absolutely. Just, for everybody, happy birthday tomorrow.
Thank you.
Because you're wonderful. And thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your time. Thanks to everybody in your family. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice one.
You too.
Bye. Thank you once again for listening to another episode of the WhistleShields Podcast. This podcast is dedicated to all the police officers who have made this possible. It is a production of the Police Officers Whistleblower Network page on Facebook. All rights reserved.